Here's everything I'll be taking with me to my 2024 weddings. Hi there, my name's George Hughes and I'm a wedding filmmaker based in the UK. If you're new around here, then welcome to my channel. This is the first of hopefully many videos where I talk about my wedding filmmaking process. So if that's something that you're interested in, then please do consider subscribing for more videos like this and Lumix content. And I guess that's a good place to start, Lumix. That's the camera system I've been using now for 3 years and I absolutely love it. Let's talk about cameras then. So I shoot on the Lumix S5 Mark II and there's a few reasons for that. First being the colour science. The colour science on the camera is absolutely fantastic. The colours look really natural, really normal, and colour grading is a breeze really, and something that doesn't take me too long to do once I've finished editing a wedding film. I think it's widely known at this point that the colour science on the S5II and all kind of Lumix cameras really in general is fantastic, and yeah, really good on the S5II. Another reason why I love the camera are the ergonomics of it. Something about the grip that I really like on the camera, and yeah, ergonomics in my opinion are quite an underrated thing, and it's a good sized camera as well. It's not too small, not too big. Stabilisation then, probably comes as no surprise me talking about stabilisation because I think it's well documented that the stabilisation on Lumix cameras is fantastic, and there's no difference there when it comes to the S5II. Stabilisation is fantastic. If I'm ever using the camera handheld, it's really easy to do. Although having said that, I do still quite like to use a gimbal anyway, just for those sort of smooth cinematic shots. And examples of that would be during like couple portraits, for example, or the confetti shot. Battery life. The battery life on the S5II is really reliable as well, and something that you don't have to worry about when you're shooting, especially long ceremonies or speeches. I know that if I set up a camera at the back of the room and I have to leave it, then I know that I'm not going to lose power 30 minutes to an hour into those speeches or ceremonies, which sometimes they can be that long. So that's something that I don't have to worry about, which is really, really nice. The menus as well. The menus on the S5II are really useful. There are times during a wedding day where you do have to dive into the settings to change a few things. Not all the time, but it can be the case. So the fact that the menus are really nicely and clearly laid out is really useful. And also the fact that you can customize and personalize like a set menu within the camera is a really useful feature as well. And on that point, if anyone would like to see a video of how I've got my S5 Mark II set up for weddings, then please do leave a comment. It is a video that I am planning on making at some point in the near future. Okay, so let's talk autofocus. So I have seen some things online where people have mentioned that the autofocus on the S5 Mark II is not maybe as good as some camera brands such as Canon or Sony. I actually do find, in my opinion, and I used the S5II for my entire 2023 wedding season, that it's actually pretty good. There are a few little quirks, such as if you are filming a shot of someone and maybe their shoulder, someone else's shoulder is in the foreground of that shot, then it can sometimes track to that. But if you can get around that, knowing those little quirks, then I actually find the autofocus to be really, really reliable. And again, I can do a video on how I've got my camera set up for that autofocus side of things, because I do try and use it for as much of the day as possible. There are of course times where I don't use autofocus, but yeah, I do find that the autofocus on the S5 Mark II is really good. And I have used other cameras such as the Canon R5, and that autofocus is good. Again, I have found that it does have a few quirks as well when it comes to autofocus, like most cameras. So if you can get around them once you've got that experience, then knowing the tools that you can put into place to circumnavigate that are really useful to know. Okay, so still on the topic of cameras then, let's talk about drones. I've just upgraded to the Mini 4 Pro from the Mini 3 Pro for this year's wedding season, and I'm very excited to use the drone for a couple of reasons. The first of all being the new waypoint feature that is available on the Mini 4 Pro. I'm super excited to use this feature because I love the idea of doing kind of transition shots in my wedding films this year, going from day to night. So setting up a waypoint of, you know, a drone shot of a part of the venue, and doing that in the day and then also in the night, and then transitioning between those two shots to kind of show the passing of time and moving from like the daytime part of the wedding to the evening time. So I'm excited to use that feature for my weddings this year. And then the other reason why I'm excited to use the Mini 4 Pro is for that D-Log M profile, so that slightly flatter profile, so I can do a bit more colour grading and kind of got a bit more flexibility in post. I am excited to use it for that reason. Unfortunately, I haven't got any clips to show you from any weddings that I've shot so far this year on the Mini 4 Pro. The only time I have used the camera this year was when I went to the beach a few weeks ago with some of my family, and I was really impressed at how the drone held up in the wind. It was quite a windy day and it did really, really well. I'll throw up that video on screen at some point if I haven't already. So I'm excited to use the Mini 4 Pro this year. Okay, let's talk about lenses then. So I own all of the S series primes apart from the 100mm 2.8 macro lens, I believe, that has just come out. That does look like a really, really good lens, but I'm not sure whether that's one that I'll be adding to my arsenal, if you like, for this year's weddings. The macro feature does look really, really cool, but I'm not sure whether I'm going to purchase that lens. What I will talk about, obviously, though, are the reasons why I do own the rest of those prime lenses, starting with the one that I'm shooting on right now, which is the 24mm. And the main reason I bought that lens is for the dancing footage that I capture on wedding days. Because of the S5 Mark II's crop in slow motion, what I did find was that sometimes when I was shooting on the 35mm, that was cropped in a little bit too much for dancing footage. I often do quite like to get quite a nice static symmetrical shot of the first dance and then shoot next to that camera on a tripod on like my 35mm or 50mm in the nowadays. So I've got a nice contrast between those two shots, and what I found was yeah, that 35mm was a little bit too cropped in, so I bought the 24mm, and using the 24mm means that I'm not too zoomed in terms of that slow motion shot, and it's a really nice lens, and obviously also pretty good for these kind of talking heads videos. But yeah, mainly the dancing footage is what I use the 24mm for. The 35mm then, that is my go-to lens for most of the wedding day. I do really love the 35mm look. It's a very versatile lens, and yeah, one that I think a lot of filmmakers do tend to use when it comes to filming weddings for that exact reason. The 50mm then, I use the 50mm mainly for detail shots. So for example, flat lays, I like to use the 50mm for flat lays. Sometimes for the odd kind of prep shot as well. It's a lovely lens, the 50mm, and if someone said to me, George, you can only film a wedding on one lens for the entire day, chances are I probably would pick the 50mm just for that versatility in terms of focal length. The 85mm then, I love the 85mm lens as well. The main time I'm using the 85mm lens is for speeches shots. So those singular shots of someone speaking at a wedding, I like to use that lens for that exact reason. However, that being said, I do also love to use an 85mm for my own wedding films for establishing shots. There's something about seeing establishing shots on an 85mm that I think look really, really cool. And it would be a really cool creative test to actually try and shoot an entire wedding on an 85mm. I never would do that, I don't think, but it would be pretty cool to see. The 85mm is a really, really nice look. And of course, I do love to use that as well for portraits, particularly if I've got a second shooter with me. Speaking of second shooters, I do also own the Sigma 2870 2.8 zoom lens, and the main time that I'm using that lens is when I'm giving that to my second shooters to use. So they've got a bit of versatility in terms of focal length when they're using that lens, especially if I'm sending them off to go and film some groom prep for me, or if they are shooting at the back of the ceremony room. We can discuss prior to that ceremony what sort of focal length to use if that lens is going to work for that. So I do tend to give that lens to my second shooters, and it's a really, really nice lens, and one that I definitely will be using this year. And then last but not least, save the biggest lens till last, I do also own the Lumix 70-200 f4 lens. The main time that I'm using that lens is for the ceremony or speeches. If I'm in a really big church, for example, and I'm quite far away, if I'm at the back of that room when I'm capturing that part of the wedding day, then I can use the 70-200 for that. It's not a lens that I often bring out on wedding days, which is a shame because it was quite expensive, and also it has got a really lovely look to it as well. I'd love to try and use it a bit more this year, but it is one of those lenses that when I do feel like I need it, I feel very relieved that I've got it in my camera bag. So along with all the lenses that I've just spoken about, I use them in conjunction with the K&F Concept quarter strength mist variable ND filter for that cinematic look. I do love that ND filter, and it really does add something cinematic to my footage. Occasionally, I will say that it can sometimes bloom the highlights a little bit too much, but on the whole, it is a fantastic ND filter and definitely the best one that I've ever used, and I would recommend it for those looking for a new ND filter. Audio then. Audio is a huge part of the viewing experience for your couples. I primarily use the Tascam DR10L, which is still the best recorder available to filmmakers in my opinion. The quality of them is amazing, and I actually own 4 of them because I think they're so good. That being said, there are times where I definitely need something a little bit different, and I use the TX660 Sony microphone for anyone that maybe doesn't have an outfit on where there's a pocket on their clothes for me to put a DR10L in. So I do use that clip-on TX660 mic for that reason, and the audio on that is also really, really good. I wouldn't say it's as good as the DR10L, but it's definitely pretty close, and yeah, a really useful microphone to have additionally in my kit. But if I ever do need it, a bit like some of the lenses I spoke about, I've got it, and I feel very relieved that I do have that with me. Okay. Lighting then. So I mainly use lighting for the dancing portion of the wedding day. The first dance, the dancing, and also fireworks and sparklers if need be. The first light that I use for my wedding films then is the Aperture 60X. It's bi-coloured, it's small and light, it's very, very powerful, and the spotlight and flood feature on that light are really, really useful. The fact that I can also use that with a V-mount battery is also really, really good. For those who are wondering what V-mount battery I use, it's the Power Extra V-mount battery. I'll pop a link to it down below. And then in conjunction with that light, I do use the Torch LED, I think it's the 300 watt version light. Again, it's bi-coloured, it's small, very, very powerful. I often put one opposite the aperture light when I'm doing the first dance, mounted to the camera, and that looks great, that kind of combination of those two lights. And also for the sparklers, I tend to put one on top of my camera, or if I've got a second shooter, I'll ask them to hold that behind me, pointing at the couple as they walk through the sparklers, and that looks really, really nice. Okay, support gear then. So tripods, gimbals, stands, the most exciting stuff that we can obviously buy as wedding filmmakers. In terms of tripod, I use the Manfrotto X Pro 400 tripod, I believe it is. I've got 2 of them, and they're a pretty good balance between sturdiness and also being lightweight, especially if I needed to use them kind of all day. Sometimes I do like to have my camera on the tripod at times when I'm getting mingling shots for a bit of extra stability. I'll kind of pack the tripod together and hold it close to my body to get a bit of extra stability, and it's really good for that purpose. I also use the Small Rig 72-inch tripod, and this is the tripod that I'll be using for my weddings that I've got overseas this year. I have used it for a couple of UK weddings, and it does work really well. It's compact, lightweight, but can easily hold my S5II and a lens, although probably not my 70-200, but I wouldn't take that abroad most likely, and I'd probably use that lens on one of my Manfrotto tripods anyway if that was the case, instead of the Small Rig one. In terms of gimbals then, I use the RS2, the DJI RS2, which is a really good gimbal that I do love using, especially after I bought the Small Rig handles. Don't always ever find like using a gimbal without handles like quite difficult, because I certainly do. And I do find myself using this gimbal for a lot of the wedding day now for those smooth cinematic shots. I'm not particularly a fan of those sort of shaky, drunk look that you can get from walking backwards when a couple are walking in front of you. When you do that handheld, I much prefer that sort of smooth cinematic look that you get from a gimbal. So I do tend to use that quite a bit now for my wedding films. Last but not least then, just in terms of support gear, I use one of the newer light stands just to put my aperture light on, and that's really sturdy, can go nice and high, and works really, really well. Right, and that's it. That's everything that I'm taking with me to my weddings this year, I think. I don't think I've missed anything. If you did find this video helpful, please do let me know. And if you have any questions about anything I've spoken about, please let me know in the comments, and I promise I'll answer all of them. I'll also link all of my equipment on my kit page, which will be in the description, so go and have a look at that if you want. And yeah, thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I do plan on making as many as possible this year, as I mentioned at the start of the video, so keep an eye out for them and do consider subscribing. Thank you again, and I will catch you at some point in the future. Bye.